Good evening, and welcome to this evening's London Ballet Circle in Conversation. If this is your first experience of LBC, we're absolutely delighted that you're with us and hope this will be start of something new for you. It's only 2 years since Gareth Haw arrived at English National Ballet, but in that short time, he has leapt, literally, from soloist to lead principal. We've seen him dance numerous roles with English National Ballet and in guest appearances, such as those he does with ballet nights here in London. So as a dancer, we know Gareth. We know his talent and his range. But behind every dancer, there's a thinking, feeling person. And tonight, with the help of Deborah Weiss, our great interviewer, we will get to know Gareth a little better. Thank you both so much for giving up your evening to be with LBC. We're very appreciative. Gareth will happily answer any questions you have. So you can type them into the chat box, which appears at the bottom of your screen. And if you would give your first name, that would be absolutely great. So that's all I have to say now, except please join me in welcoming Gareth Haw and Deborah Weiss for this evening's In Conversation.
Good evening. Good evening, Gareth.
Hi, Deborah.
It's great to see you, and I'm going to take you right back to the start of your life, which I believe was in Wales. I'm not quite sure whereabouts in Wales, but I'd like to know how you actually got into dance. And yeah, the origins. Let's go back to the beginning.
Go back to the very beginning. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I was born in Cardiff, and I grew up in a very small town just on the border of England and Wales, Chepstow. And yeah, that's where my early years began, really. My introduction to dance in general. I have an older sister. She's a few years older than me, and she was already doing ballet from a very young age. And my father was away working a lot when we were younger, so I feel like I was always having to go with my mum to pick up my sister from here and there. And at a young age, I was probably around 6 or 7. When you see a group dancing in a room, you kind of at that age just want to jump right in and be a part of it. So I think it was I don't a lot of the times you hear kind of dancers or artists saying, I just had this huge passion for dance and I just loved it. And I wasn't one of those kids, and I'm very open to admitting that. Growing up, I did absolutely everything. It was football on a Monday, swimming on a Tuesday, golf on a Wednesday. I did absolutely everything, and dance and ballet just happened to be one of those things at that age. So I really blame my sister for all of this, to be honest with you. Um, so that's where it all began. And it was just a kind of odd dance lesson once a week, twice a week. It wasn't just ballet. I also did a bit of tap and jazz and bits and pieces. And it just kind of all was part of my weekly routine of being a young boy in a small town in Wales, really.
So, but there must have been a point where someone said, "Ooh, I think he's got a bit of talent. Maybe he should go to a vocational school or something like that." Or was it literally that you were following your sister's footsteps?
Yeah, I was enrolled in the Royal Ballet School's Junior Associates program. I was just part of a local dance school, but my ballet teacher then had attended White Lodge herself at a young age, and she was kind of the inspiration to put me into or try and get into junior associates of the Royal Ballet School. So that was kind of like my feeder step into that kind of process. I can still remember those 3 audition pictures, one in first plie, one in a first arabesque, because everyone, I'm not sure if they still do that. But that was kind of my process. So I would go once a month over to I think it was Bristol or Bath in that area to do my junior associates once a month. And then that's kind of, you see that feeder process of how they slowly get people across. And then yeah, and then from the age of 10, I was ready to be shipped off to White Lodge.
So did your sister go to White Lodge as well?
No, my sister went, we actually both went away at the same year, albeit she's a few years older than me, but she joined Elmhurst and I joined White Lodge. Yeah.
So what was it like leaving home? You say you've come from a small town in Wales, you know, and then suddenly you're in London, and I'm assuming you're a boarder at White Lodge. Um,
Mhm.
what was that like, being away from home? And
Yeah. Um, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was fantastic. I was in a big open dormitory with about 10 other boys at that point in White Lodge. And yeah, I thought it was quite brilliant, to be honest with you. I was fortunate. I wasn't a child that kind of got homesick or missed home. I still remember being a little bit apprehensive and anxious to kind of leaving home and getting started. But as soon as I was there, you know, we were a good group of boys. We enjoyed to have our fun. I imagine that the staff at White Lodge didn't enjoy it as much as we did back then, looking after us. But we were a good group of boys. I think we probably had too much energy for them. But I have to say, I really enjoyed kind of being away, and yeah, we made the most of it.
and presumably there was that feeling that suddenly you were with people that were all on the same page as you, and you all wanted to dance, and that's a really, really good environment to grow and become more focused, I guess.
Yeah, I think what is difficult is you are taking a very young being at the age of 10, 11, and trying to get them to focus on this is going to be your destiny. I think that that's really challenging. But of course, they do provide a very safe environment for us all to thrive amongst each other. And yeah, it's obviously beneficial to be around a group who have similar aspirations, and you kind of enclosed in the middle of Richmond Park, and off you go, Pilates at 8:30 on a Monday morning.
It wasn't like that in my day, I can tell you.
Uh,
I don't think Pilates was really a thing then, but
yeah.
anyway. So you spent 5 years at White Lodge, and presumably quite early on you realised that you did want to become a professional dancer. As long as you got through all the stages. I know that White Lodge has assessments. I know it's changing,
Yeah.
but it used to
Yeah.
be assessed
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how are you feeling about that? Because most people of 11 or 12 do not know
Mm.
what they want to be when they're grown up.
Yeah, I think as I said, from a young age, I don't think I was necessarily one of these young students who was like, this is my destiny and all of that. I mean, it's quite hard at that young age also to know how good you are at something. You know, it's really difficult. I remember, yeah, back in the time that I was there, it was assessments every year, and it was brutal. It was, if you don't get above 50, you're out. That was as simple as that. And I remember my year 7 assessment, you know, being age 11, and kind of you get this number in the post, and I remember it was 80 something, and I didn't really know what that number meant or anything. It was only until kind of you start asking, you know, some of your friends, oh, what number did you get, and what number did you get? And then slowly I started to realize, oh, I think my number's higher than everyone else's. So it was only at that point did I realize to myself, you know, oh, actually I might be okay at this. Like, and I think to know that you might be good at something at a young age is quite exciting. And often that's what you you're likely to tend to go with. So I feel like probably closer to the age of 13 or 14, you know, that was where I was really clear, no, this is a future that I would love to have for myself. Yeah.
So after that, you had to go through the agonizing thing of were you going to get into the upper school,
Yeah.
which is another hurdle. And
Yeah.
you're still a very young person, but you got in. Tell me
Yeah.
about your time at the upper school.
Yeah, upper school is it's a very different experience to White Lodge. All of a sudden you're in the center of London. And back then also, I know it's changed huge amounts over the last couple decade or two, but you were kind of in a flat, and you were kind of expected to be an adult. You know, you're cooking for yourself, you're doing absolutely everything for yourself. And you had at that point also a huge influx of kind of, you're at White Lodge and you know where you sit within your class, let's say, and all of a sudden you turn up at the upper school and you've got, you know, I think we were only 4 or 5 boys from men from White Lodge who got in. And then all of a sudden you're with 10 internationals as well. So the competition really hots up, let's say, and the kind of you're expected to be an adult, just from one day to the next. But the training there at upper school was unbelievable, I have to say. We had incredible teachers, the programming that we were put through, and that's where I feel like things start to get really serious and you really get to work, let's say. So it's very different from White Lodge, but I kind of feel like I slowly started to thrive in that kind of atmosphere.
So I'm just trying to think back to we nearly had another visitor then, didn't we?
I know, we probably are going to have another visitor at some point. I must apologize.
Um, don't apologize. It's just suddenly you had tail waving behind you. So yes, I'm trying to think back to your graduation performance. I think it was Raymonda, wasn't it?
So Raymonda was my graduation performance. We also did Rush from Christopher Wheeldon, which was a piece choreographed on San Francisco Ballet. We had Yuri Killian in our program. We had a really heavy graduation performance. We had a pas de deux from Derek Dean called Chanson, which was choreographed on, almost no one's seen this pas de deux actually, but it was choreographed on Alessandra Ferri and David Wall. We had a really heavy graduation program at
But so when you were doing that, I know I've leapt forward a tiny bit.
Yeah.
When you were when you got to that point, did you know what the future held? I mean, had you hoped you would be offered a contract with the Royal, or had you already made a decision that you wanted to step away and explore another company?
So as soon as I got into my graduation year at the upper school, my mind was straight away, I need to get a job. You know, and I remember in the second week, I had already made a list of the companies that I would like to dance for. It wasn't a huge list. I think at that point, I wasn't necessarily too focused on whether I wanted to stay in the country or move abroad. But what I was aware of is that I always felt that if I didn't move abroad straight away, then I probably wouldn't do it. And that was an experience I was always very open to. So I made a list, and straight away, already in like the third week, I went to do an audition at Royal Danish Ballet and at Stuttgart Ballet. And kind of very quickly I had contracts at both of those, and I had my eyes set on Stuttgart. It was probably one of the very, you know, top companies for me. Also back then, that company was, I really believe that they had some of the best dancers in the world, especially for men. It was unbelievable. And they had already asked me to join at Christmas. And so this is end of September, and they'd already asked me to join at Christmas. And that was an offer that I was strongly considering. And I was about to sign my contract to join Stuttgart. I'd had a conversation. It was Kevin was the director of Royal at that time. I'd had a conversation with him, and that was also the year that they were first bringing in I'm not sure what they call it, the apprentice program, or I'm not sure what they call this, the Ode Jebsen Young Artists program.
That's it.
That was the first year they were going to start that. And I'm going to be honest with you, when he mentioned that to me and told me if I was interested in that, I would have to hold off and wait because it was coming in later in the year. In my head, I was thinking, I don't think that any of these people are going to get full contracts with the company because it was brand new, right? Normally, they took one boy, one girl-ish, right? So I was thinking there's no way that they're all going to get contracts. So I was very set in my mind that I wanted a full contract after 8 years training at the Royal Ballet. And I was about to sign my contract for Stuttgart, and basically that day, Aaron Watkin, who was the director of Dresden Semperoper Ballet, came in to watch the graduate year in the upper school. And normally what happens is once you've got contracts at upper school, you're not allowed to be in the open classes because otherwise you just have directors coming in and they want certain dancers and then they have to say, oh, well, no, they've already got jobs and whatnot. So for whatever reason, I missed my class that day and I ended up taking this class. And I wasn't that focused, it didn't mean much to me. I had no pressure. I was signing my contract with Stuttgart. And the class finishes and they say to Aaron Watkin, oh, is there anyone you would like to speak to? And he goes, yeah, I would like to speak to him. And I thought, oh, okay. And I've told Aaron this. I didn't know much about the company. I was going into this interview with him, like scanning Wikipedia for the repertoire of the company. And I went into an interview with him. I was only 18, very young, and he made a really, really good pitch for me. He was very honest as well, and I think that's what I connected with. And he said, look, if you're looking for X, Y, and Z, then Stuttgart is your place. If you're looking for a company that's going to invest in you, then maybe we're the best option for you. So that, right, come on then. So that's how I ended up. I'm not normally a massive risk taker, but that kind of was a risk going with Dresden as I wasn't too sure about it. And that's how it played out. And then ironically, all of the 6 dancers who joined Royal on the apprentice program, they all got contracts as well. So that's how sometimes life plays out. But I do not regret anything in my decision about going to Dresden because it was absolutely the perfect place for me to be in that time. Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think it was the right decision. Because I think Aaron is a real nurturer. And I think when you're coming out of school, it's absolutely essential that you have that person who is really looking out for you.
Yeah.
And that you don't just get into a corps de ballet and stay there. So he really started developing you from the beginning, didn't he? He pushed you when you needed pushing, then left you, and so on and so forth. So tell me about those first years in Dresden.
Yeah, when I finished school, I was by no means at all a finished article, nor do I think that I'm anywhere near a finished article now. But I was tall, I had a kind of reasonably strong build, but I joke it, I'm actually quite uncoordinated, and I needed a lot of work, and luckily that was a company that were happy to put in the work. The company had a lot of tall ballerinas, a lot of very tall ballerinas, and not that many tall men to partner them. So I do feel as soon as I got there, I was slowly, they didn't put too much pressure on me at all, but I was slowly, my pathway of like, we're going to need you to partner these women was fairly clear. And what was a big kind of adjustment for me was the repertoire. I think that I wasn't expecting that, then we were doing 12 programs a season with multiple quadruple or triple bills in it, with a lot of really, really diverse repertoire. And I wasn't exposed to that. I think, I was from the Royal Ballet School. It was kind of everyone needs to look at the Royal Ballet, and you have Frederick Ashton. I know things have changed now, but that was kind of yeah, quite a long time ago as well. And so I wasn't used to being asked to be given improvisation techniques or tasks and all of a sudden be expected to do those things. And so I think that was a kind of, it was a really, it was a big eye opener for me of what kind of is out there in Central Europe in the terms of dance, as opposed to just a classical ballet company. So that was definitely an adjustment for me. But I mean, as a company back then, it was absolutely phenomenal. The artists in that company, who had all come from all different parts of the world, but also companies like dancers that had come in from Royal Ballet Flanders, also when back that was thriving. And so I felt like I had so much inspiration around me, let alone the coaches and the choreographers coming in, that everything was there. You just have to open your eyes and soak it up.
So I'm really interested to talk to you about certain choreographers.
Yeah.
There are two that I want to really delve into, but I also
Yeah.
want to ask you about working with people like Alexander Ekman. And you've done quite a bit of Pina Bausch, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so un-Royal Ballet, really. I mean that in a polite way as well. It's
Yeah.
just not their kind of bag.
Yeah.
Were you ever in a piece called Cow?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did see that. Now
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
just completely off the wall and
Yeah.
so entertaining. What was that like
Yeah.
being in that?
Yes, yeah. So that was my first year in the company, and then he had this humongous creation with a massive budget, and the theatre in Dresden is humongous, and the stage can do absolutely everything. So it was kind of a wild experience for me, because I wasn't used to creating a piece. I was kind of the mentality coming from school that the choreographer comes in and tells you what to do and you just copy it. But that's actually not how the world nowadays of choreography works at all. It's actually much more a collaborative process. And so I think it was a time where I just had to be open to anything, crawling on the floor for hours and all sorts of things. But actually, Cow is one of the biggest spectacles I've ever been a part of. I mean, the stage was doing absolutely everything. He had a crazy designer, and the German audience likes a piece that's out there as well. So just remember that the audience would just erupt for this piece and big emotional journey as well. So I was just trying to be open and go go head first into everything that was thrown at me.
So yeah, he in particular, I remember I spoke to him after the premiere, and I said, I think the British would call you the cheeky chappy of dance. Because he takes incredible risks, really, doesn't he? And it's a certain kind of humor, but somehow he always gets away with it. It was the same in
Yeah.
Caxton.
Yeah. It would be very interesting if something like Cow was to be staged in London. I would be very interested to see the public's response.
Well, so would I, but I think it would be good.
Yeah.
I think the British public, they're changing a lot,
Okay.
and I think if it's entertaining, I think
Yeah. Yeah.
they might go for it. They might not. I don't know. So specifically, I want to talk to you about working with David Dawson first of all,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he has a very special voice.
Mm,
And you get it. So
mm.
tell me about working with.
Yeah, I've known David now for over 10 years. We've got a huge working relationship. In my, earlier years at the company, the first thing, and actually David has been a pivotal part of my career, because the first time that I partnered Sung, who is known as my kind of business wife, let's say, partnered each other for almost 10 years now. He was the first person to ever put us together. He took a huge risk on me, as I'd never really done his works or partnered her, but he took a huge risk, and we created the Four Seasons, which I think is one of his best ever ballets. It's to Max Richter's recomposition of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It's an unbelievable ballet. Sung and I did the principal couple who focused on the winter movements, and it's a stunning pas de deux. So he took a big risk on me in the beginning. And so he's been kind of monumental in my career pathway. But David has a very, very unique choreographic language, a vocabulary, and also messaging through his works. He's kind of more known for his abstract works, let's say, but within that, them being labeled as an abstract work, non-narrative. Nevertheless, they always have a message. And so his choreographic vocabulary is very fluid, it is very expansive, it's very stretched out, which kind of suits me in the sense of given my height and kind of double jointed elbows, and he really expands what we know as the classical form. And Sung and I both connected with him as a human being, as a person. And so we both get his language from a choreographic sense, but also the message that he's trying to convey. And I think that that's also really important for him, so that we're kind of two humans in the studio together.
Yeah, it's almost as if you're speaking his thoughts. You're as you're moving. It's and I always think he's the kind of king of no preparation. You can't see, there's none of this sort of sitting in a fourth position waiting to pirouette. You just don't know where the movements are coming from, and it's very continuous. But it looks to me, and you'll be able to answer this, as if it's very strenuous in terms of partnering and where you have to keep going, because there isn't a lot of sitting around or anything. So
you're very right. It's very continuous movement. It's very expansive movement, and it is equally very fluid, but you are constantly moving almost at all times. That's, of course, particularly hard for the girls, but for the men, it's really difficult because you constantly find yourself moving a lot of weight around as well. So you're constantly partnering in more unconventional grips. He'll almost never allow you just to like hold a girl by the waist, is what we expect in classical ballet. It's always some armpit grip, inversion. You're running around the stage with her on your shoulder, and then all of a sudden you go into a dance break, and he's known for his unbelievable partnering, and he's an incredible partner. I can tell you, never say something to David Dawson in the studio that it's not possible, because he'll put two girls up on his shoulder and show you that it's possible. I learned that very early on with him. But I think his connectivity in his work is extremely important, and how that links with a partner as well. Now it makes a lot of sense to me, and I can kind of close my eyes and I know exactly what he will want before he's even said it. But in the beginning, it's a big learning process, and I was very lucky to have Sung there, who's always had a lot more experience than me, really guide me and test me as well.
So just before I move on to another choreographer, tell me a bit more about Sang, as in Sanguen Lee. I should just for the members.
Yeah.
Because you have an absolutely unique rapport with her. You can see that you just feel each other's presence in such an incredible way, and it makes it very special to watch. I'm sure it must be equally special to be there with her. Tell me about it.
Yeah. it's sometimes quite hard to find the words. I truly don't believe that words exist in the English language to express our kind of partnership. I mean, physically, yeah, of course, we're both very tall and long limbs and all of that. But I mean, we really can read each other's minds somehow. We're known for our partnership. We've worked together for so many years across such a large breadth of repertoire. We've traveled the world together. You know, there's probably not a single thing she doesn't know about me or I don't know about her. And it's yeah, a lot of people often think that we're together, and it's really like a business partnership. But we get each other in every sense of the word. I know exactly what she wants, and she knows exactly what I want, and we really can just read each other's minds. We've been through a lot of challenges together, and I think that's where you really build the trust and strength of a partnership. And you know, it's led to a point where I can really partner her with my eyes closed. But I think that I think the level that we connect with each other as humans allows us to have that space within our work partnership, and support each other, challenge each other. She's for many years had to hold my hand and show me the way. She was already a principal dancer when I was a baby in the corps de ballet. She is a humongous part of why I'm where I am today. And we continue. I think a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people come watch our rehearsals and don't realize that we're just laughing at each other most of the day. But we can kind of speak within sign language at times. And I feel like I'm just getting to a point now where I'm really supporting her. You know, it's kind of remarkable. I mean, actually, she's not going to be too bothered if I say her age, because I'm sure it's on Wikipedia, but she's just had an Aurora debut at 39. I mean, how many ballerinas debut Aurora at 39? And, you know, it was kind of interesting because that's a huge thing to do, right? And I think she was a little bit anxious. And I thought for the first act that, okay, I'm going to sit in the front wing, you know, just so I can see her. And I really can't express what our partnership does for each other. I remember my Le Bayadere debut a few years ago, and I was exhausted in my debut in the premiere. I was so exhausted, and you do the whole first act without seeing Nakia, right? You do the whole, and I was so tired, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And then all of a sudden, in the interval before Shades, I saw her, and everything just went. I just felt fresh as a daisy. I just didn't feel anything, and it was like nothing had happened. It was just starting. So probably haven't expressed too clearly our partnership. But yeah, sometimes words can't quite describe things, right?
It sounds pretty magical, I have to say. That is wonderful. Now, I wanted to move on to working for Billy Forsythe, because he's another person whose work you are incredibly well suited to. So tell me a bit about working with him.
Yeah, my first introduction with William Forsythe was a pretty heavy one. The company was going on tour to the Paris Opera, to Palais Garnier, and I think, just turned 19, beginning of my second year in the company. And I was chosen to do In the Middle of Somewhat Elevated there, which is kind of iconic because that's where it was originally done on Sylvie and whatnot. And we were going to the Paris Opera to do their ballet. And I was just young. I'd never done a Forsythe piece. I'd never done a Forsythe pas de deux. And I had these two prima ballerinas whipping me into shape. That was my first experience with him. I was kind of quite taken back at that point because, you know, you think of he's been kind of one of the most monumental choreographers of generations now, and he's going to be such a pillar in the future of dance that we're going to know of what he's done. carve that pathway for the next generation of choreographers. And I was really taken back just to see, like, he's a normal human, you know. He'll say, like, he jokes calling himself granddad. And think one thing, especially in regards to William Forsythe and David Dawson, is that they will, any boundary or any limit you think that you have, they will blast that open for you, and you've got no idea where you're going, but they are so much further ahead than you think you'll ever be, and they allow you to really open your mind to reaching your fullest potential. William Forsythe is, I mean, the man's an absolute genius. He's kind of like a scientist, a psychologist. Like, he's everything. The way that he sees the human structure, and he's broken down the classical shape and form and inverted it and put it backwards, and all of these, that is so complex that I feel like I can only achieve 2% of what he actually does himself. He is hyper musical. I mean, his understanding for rhythm. We'll be in the studio and he'll be doing all these little things and, you know, syncopating stuff, and I my brain can't compute the way that his brain computes. But there's also a huge range to William Forsythe's work as well. I think he kind of, you know, some of the more commercial, in the middle of sort of like, you know, smack the leg and whatever, but there's a huge huge range to his repertoire as well, which I think ENB probably showed a little bit of in its last triple bill, with kind of a piece like Rearray coming into the repertoire, unbelievably complex. I mean, probably one of the most difficult pieces I've ever seen or witnessed. And then kind of more commercial pieces now, like Playlist, which is kind of just pure entertainment and gets everyone up and moving, right? But I think, you know, I think one of their biggest attributes is that they will just smash down any boundary or limitation that you thought you had for yourself, and and then hopefully you don't look back.
So I'm quite interested to know how this affects, because when you were in Dresden, you had such a wide range of repertoire, and some of it incredibly contemporary, but you're always expected to go back to the classics and do your nutcrackers and donkeys and things like that. So how do you, first of all, physically cope with that switch? Because classical ballet is so upright, isn't it, in a sense? And on balance, and then Forsythe and God knows who else these days are so off balance. So take me through that process of how you think each benefits the other.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the reason that I couldn't do a double tour from fifth position until last year, because of all of the time I spent in parallel in Dresden. No, I'm joking. I think that regardless of when we were talking about classical ballet, neoclassical, contemporary, it does all fall under the realm of dance, right? And you'll see many companies in the world now trying to break down those boundaries and labels and boxes. I think that when you have the opportunity to do more neoclassical repertoire or potentially contemporary repertoire, what you will learn as a dancer is the importance of connectivity between each step and the fluidity of that movement, which sometimes in classical ballet we lose, or especially coming from certain trainings where it's very positional based. You know, it's really just getting from one position to, but if you look at any extremely talented dancer out there, it's the way they get from position A to position B, and it's that in between that makes it interesting to watch. If you look at someone like William Bracewell, one of the most connected, fluid classical male dancers in the world right now, and I think that someone who's been able to do more neoclassical repertoire and contemporary repertoire, if they can take that idea into their classical work, that's when you see such a well-rounded artist on the stage. And I think the fundamentals are the same. looking at dance, you know, musicality, you know, execution, all these things. And a lot of interest, and a lot of the dancers who were considered the better kind of neoclassical contemporary dancers were the ones who also whose classical ballet was the most interesting to watch, because they find new ways to do things and they don't set themselves an agenda of perfection. They're used to finding their own way of doing a step, and within the classical form as well. I think especially nowadays, you know, we really have to find our own way of delivering the classical form. You know, I won't be able to deliver certain classical ballet steps or ways of doing it that someone who's half my size, and you know, and we all, I think that's what's important, is that in the neoclassical repertoire or the contemporary repertoire, often you're allowed a little bit more room to find your way to do it. And I think that if someone can bring that across, and that's what I've tried to bring across now into my classical work, I think that that's where you become a really well-rounded artist or movement specialist, let's say, as opposed to just being like, okay, I'm a classical ballet dancer, or I'm just that, you know.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense. And I think you've managed it really well in terms of your own career, because you when you're doing classical work, you do look very, very classical, and yet is sometimes when you're doing a Forsythe or something, it
Mm,
almost looks as if you're a contemporary dancer. It's extraordinary. So
mm,
I think you've really sorted that.
mm,
You've got it right. Now, can we move on to working with ENB? I'm assuming, sorry, English National Ballet. So I'm assuming that one of the main reasons was Aaron coming,
mm,
and your further development. There must have been a sort of thing about coming back to England that must have been quite nice. But
mm,
given what you'd achieved in Dresden,
mm,
it must have been interesting to then think, right, I'm going to take a little detour and do some, you know, some different bits of dancing. You know, the repertoire is going to be slightly different from
mm.
Dresden. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that move and how nerve-wracking it was, or not, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that move came a little bit as a surprise. I'm not sure potentially how much longer I would have stayed in Dresden, but I definitely wasn't planning to leave when I did. It kind of all happened within a matter of days that he he was announced as the new director of English National, and the next day he had Sung and I in his office and kind of was like, I want you to come with me. And you know, kind of, it was, you know, a split. It was a very quick decision that we were going to go. And I think that I was very excited. I was very excited. I don't think I had any clue what I was getting myself into, to be honest. Think I was, yeah, I was looking forward to the idea of being back in the UK for sure. But to be honest with you, I really think it takes working at ENB a year or two to really understand what it means to work at ENB. So probably I was quite fortunate in being a little bit naive and not really knowing what was ahead of me, let's say. But I was really excited by the opportunity to join another company. I've always enjoyed learning from my colleagues and being inspired by the other artists around me. And, you know, so I was excited to be amongst a new group of dancers. And I definitely felt that I was ready for a bit of a challenge as well. So I was ready for that, but I can't say that I knew exactly what was coming my way, that's for sure.
When you say that, was it partly the kind of the number of the performances and, you know, hundreds of nutcrackers and
Mm,
whatever, and 8 shows a week on tour?
mm,
I mean, because
mm.
in Germany it's not really like that if you're working for an opera house. Or can it be like that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, no, exactly. I mean, you know, most kind of German state theatres, you're sharing a theatre with an orchestra and an opera. So you're not doing anywhere near as many performances as a kind of traditional touring ballet company is doing, because you're sharing the space or the stage with two other huge entities. And the way that things are programmed are then very different, because you're not going to get 8 shows in a week. You're going to get 2 here, 3 there, and you're kind of alternating the space, right? Whereas ENB is a very unique company, because you're either rehearsing, you do big rehearsal blocks, and then you're into performance mode where, yeah, the company are getting through ridiculous amount of shows in a short space of time. So it's a complete different setup to the whole way that you approach your profession. That is, you know, I know that sounds quite big, but it really is a huge difference. I think I was aware of, yeah, the amount that I was going to have to do a lot more shows. Probably wasn't quite aware how many. But the, you know, Ian ENB's setup, I really do believe that ENB is one of the hardest working companies in the world. I mean, what some of those dancers are going through, you know, doing 40 something nutcrackers, or, you know, when we open with Swan Lake and they've got 14 shows in, you know, 11 days, and that's not even including the extra 5 stage calls that no one knows about, you know. So yeah, it's pretty unbelievable performance schedule.
Would you say that in some ways it's an advantage, though, in that instead of getting one performance of Sleeping Beauty and maybe doing Bluebird or something else at another performance, you get 3 shots at
Mm, mm,
whatever it is, and then 3 shots at something else,
mm,
because of the sheer number, and presumably people get injured as well, and you end up stepping in.
mm,
And I mean, that must be in terms of preparing yourself and getting into the zone and all the rest of it before you go
mm,
on. You must
mm,
feel comfortable in a way that you do know what it's going to feel like, but maybe you can bring something different to that
mm,
performance
mm.
because you're comfortable with the number of performances that you're doing.
Mm. I think that one thing that is really positive about it is you become very comfortable on stage. What was sometimes difficult in Dresden is you might have one performance of Nutcracker, and then you might have 8 days break in between where you need to rehearse again. And by the time you get back to stage, you feel like you haven't been on it again, you know, whereas at ENB, you get unbelievably comfortable at being on stage and performing. And I think that that's such an integral part of an artist being comfortable to try and deliver their best work, is being comfortable on the stage. I think that at ENB, luckily, because we do so many performances back to back, you just kind of step out there as if it's nothing. And that's a huge part of kind of delivering your full potential, is being calm and in the moment. And I do think that, yeah, also for the younger artists coming through, is that they have that, you know, stage experience is so important. It's so important for an artist. And I do feel like we get that opportunity, which is nice.
And sometimes, I mean, particularly when you're young in that situation, you get to step into a role which you perhaps weren't expecting. You might have been in
Mm.
brackets, you know,
Yeah,
learn
exactly.
it, but then somebody gets injured and you think, oh my God, I've got to go on,
I know,
which is
and
fabulous.
that's the term at EMB, because you know, if someone new says, "Oh, but I'm only in brackets," you say, "Just wait, you're going to end up on opening night or something." You know, you've got to be ready. I think the other consideration is, you know, EMB's performance schedule. You know, doing 130, 40 shows in a year is really competing with humongous companies. That's the schedule that they're putting on as well. But we're not a huge company. We're 65 to 70 dancers. You know, if you compare that to somewhere like Royal Ballet, it's got over 100 dancers, you know. So we do pick up a lot of injuries because the schedule is really tight, and you've got to be ready at all times to pick up extra shows or things that you weren't expecting to do, and kind of adds to all the excitement of the lottery.
So you're currently doing Beauty, aren't you?
Yeah.
And Nutcracker. well, you
Yeah.
could be doing Nutcracker. So
Yeah.
tell me about doing beauty, because Florimond is, or Desiree, I can't remember which one it is in that production.
Yeah.
That's a ballet where the prince doesn't come on until the second act.
Yeah.
That must be you must be sitting there.
I'm sitting there hoping that Sun gets through the Rose Adagio. She's my inspiration. But yeah, it's kind of peculiar because you are the prince, but you actually don't have that much material. You kind of miss the first hour of the performance. So it's quite weird because normally I have to be in the theatre 2 hours before a show to do my makeup and do my warm-up. And then all of a sudden they're kind of getting there half an hour before it starts because I've got so long. Yeah, it is different. It's a different experience to kind of something like Swan Lake, where you're out there in the very first few bars of the music. It's We're doing the Macmillan's production. It's unbelievably beautiful, grand production. It's absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, it's kind of a weird start to get into the ballet because the curtain goes up on the second act and you're kind of on stage for a matter of moments and you go straight into an adage variation. So yeah, it's a different process. With Sleeping Beauty, you kind of go straight into the vision with her. And then you've got to really get your tanks going for the third act. On the flip side, because it's kind of condensed for the prince, it means that you get to stay warm the whole time and you don't have to do any extra warm-ups mid-shows. So by the time you change your costume, you're ready to go again, which is nice. But for the prince, it is a short show, yeah.
But something that is one of those things that you always want to tick off your wish list, that you get to dance, really, because it's a beautiful ballet.
Yeah.
So what other challenges have you come across since joining ENB? Because I feel as if you were sort of thrown in there and very, very quickly you created David Dawson's Four Last Songs, which must have been bliss to do that. But you've had to do all sorts of other things. Johann Inger's Carmen, and yeah, tell me a bit about the new things that you've done since you've been in.
Yeah, I think that, given that I've followed the same director, I kind of was aware that the versatility that the repertoire was going to have, and that's something that I'm very used to. So I don't think that that's not something that's taken me by surprise or flipping from different programs. And quite a few of the choreographers that have come into the English National Ballet's repertoire are choreographers that I've already worked with, so that was really familiar territory for me, which is something that's kind of a juxtaposition. So whereas for the whole company, it was very new to work with David Dawson. For me, that was like my bread and butter, right? So I was kind of fortunate to join a company with a lot of people who were coming in to work with the company. I already had relationships with, working with them, and I kind of knew what they were going to be after. So I do think that has really helped me. I think the biggest challenge coming to London was, the demand in the classical repertoire. And the amount of shows, I was kind of in Dresden, I'd probably do, 2 Nutcrackers or 2 Swan Lakes. And then all of a sudden, I think last season I did 13 Nutcrackers, I did 13. So I think that was a big challenge for Sung and I, was the demand in the performances. And I think that, the reality is when you move to London, it's a whole different ballgame. You've got a lot of people in the audience that really know what they're watching, and you're then exposed to things like the press, like all of that, and that's not something that we were exposed to in Dresden. It's a very different ball game out there when you come to London. you know, it's a different league, and I think that was just something that we had to take on board in that first season. That these were all things that were gonna add to the experience of joining English National Ballet. Yeah, I think we did okay.
Yes, you did. I wanted to ask a little bit about the future, because I noticed, for example, that you are, I can't remember what the exact title is, but like on the board of Anna Du Boisson's school,
Yeah.
and whether you see yourself a long way in the future, sort of going into a bit more of a mentoring role, um, or teaching or whatever, or
Mm,
whether,
mm,
I don't know. I think it's a very nice thing that you are pushing the up and comings now that you
mm,
arrived, you're a lead principal and everything.
mm,
You
mm,
have an interest in
mm.
helping uh, the younger people.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a patron for Anna Du Boisson's Foundation, and I'm trying to do as much as I possibly can to support them on their mission. And yeah, I can't say right now necessarily whether, teaching the next generation is going to be something that's for me. I spend a lot of time, at English National Ballet. We've got unbelievable talent among the young males in the company. You've got dancers coming in at the age of 18 with a more finished off technique than I have now. And so slowly trying to guide them through, because it's one thing, just having a very refined technique, but it's a huge, long journey to kind of making your way to be able to do kind of soloist roles, first soloist roles, principal roles. So I'm very aware of trying to support them where I can in guiding them, especially when it comes to things like partnering. And yeah, I think as an art form, we are going into testing times. We're going into challenging times regarding funding. Obviously, it's no surprise it is a key issue, and it's going to develop into a bigger issue probably. I hate to say that. So funding is always going to be arts is always going to be one of the first things to be cut. And I think accessibility, I've been becoming more aware of how expensive our art form is becoming. If you look at some of the ticket prices, what some of the companies are charging at the moment. And I was a very young boy when my mum first took me to the Nutcracker. I was 8 or 9. But all of a sudden now, if tickets are costing 100, 150 upwards, it's becoming quite sad. So I think that also we really need to look at our accessibility, our inclusion, so that we can, still generate that next generation and inspire them to have their own journeys and drive the art form forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that there are lots of factors that might possibly hinder the younger generation. And it has changed enormously. The best thing I think that's happened is that all the major companies are becoming much more open to a diverse repertoire
Mm,
through necessity. I mean, going back
mm,
years and years and years,
mm,
when I was doing it, it would never have occurred to me that I would have to do something as something like David Dawson, a David Dawson
mm,
ballet, because and
mm,
I watch it and I just think, how do they do that?
mm.
But over the years, it's morphed into just a much wider repertoire. So, um, yeah, how do you think that's going to go? I mean, is there going to be more crossover?
I think you know, for major companies' pathway to survival, it's going to be about being attractive or open to a wider ranging audience. You know, that's why you'll see at the moment a lot of major companies putting on a bit more of a mixed repertoire, is because they're trying to appeal to a wider range of humans, let's say. And so I think that will inevitably continue. I think it's also really important that we respect the art form's heritage and what's got us to this point, so that we don't just go and do, you know. So it's a real, you know, a lot of major companies you will see now are really trying to respect the heritage ballets that built these companies, you know. And then you've got a lot of these kind of more in-between works, and then generate new creative spaces for us to drive the art form forward. I do think that that seems to be a business model for reasonable success at the moment. I know it's really difficult because as audience members, you know, you're always going to have people who absolutely love the pure classical form, and you're going to have, you know, a different bunch of people who just want new. We live in a phase in the world where, you know, everything is just, what can you do that's never been seen, and just fast and quick and go. And that also has its effects on our art form as well, as the integrity of some of the work that's being put out there. So I think it seems to be very important for most companies to appeal to a wider range of an audience. And I think at the moment in time, that is what is required. Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting response. But so I'm going to ask you something now. If you could pick maybe one or two things that have been a really special kind of a turning point for you in your career that you've danced, or a reason why. I mean, it could be, for example,
Mm,
being put with Sang as
mm.
your partner, but was there a moment when that you can remember that you feel really has made a difference to you
Mm.
in your journey as a dancer?
Yeah, I think if I look back to my younger years, it would definitely be, you know, creating the Four Seasons with Sung, you know, because that really has carved you know, the way for our partnership to build. And that's kind of huge part of what my career has been built off to this point. So I do think that that moment was very pivotal, especially because I was, you know, it was kind of my first principal role as well at that point. You know, and then the ball gets rolling and you kind of feel like you're in a washing machine for quite a few years. And I think of recent, I think that opening night, Swan Lake at the Royal Albert Hall, you know, I think that that was probably also quite a pivotal moment in my career with the cinema relay filming as well. I think that that was also kind of a big moment where I felt like of kind of slowly getting to the beginning of feeling like I'm accomplishing myself as a dancer on stage. So I think that, yeah, that was probably another moment.
Um, I've got to ask you, what is it like knowing that the cameras are rolling during the performance? I mean, it must be unbelievably pressurized.
Yeah, it's again, it was a new experience for me and for us because we're not a company that had done a lot of filming or any kind of cinema relays. And at the Royal Albert Hall, you know, you're in this 360. So we had 20 cameras, we had a spider cam above us, we had one on the stage. But I tried not to focus on that at all too much. You know, I try and go out there and give best is not the right word, but I try and give my best performance regardless of whether there's a camera. I try to move the audience members, and that's just the same regardless of if they start putting cameras in front of them. My objective doesn't change. Of course, the pressure goes up a little bit. The pressure does go up a little bit, but I didn't really try and think too much about, all these cameras and all of that. I just tried to stay in the moment and just deliver the performance that I was trying to deliver in that time.
Wow. Um, that's really interesting.
Mm.
So I'm probably going to move on to questions now, if
Mm.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I have one here from Susan who says, you talk about the intense schedule at ENB and having to be
Mm.
ready to step in when a dancer is
Mm.
injured. Do you
Mm.
have a particular strategy for avoiding injury, or are you just
Mm.
one of those lucky people who isn't injury prone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that at the point I'm at in my career right now, I try to manage my workload. Um, I I don't try and go hell for leather every single day. I think that I know my body quite well, and I know also Sung and I are quite tactical in when we start to push and when we hold off. And when we've done a lot, we try and let ourselves recover before we go again. I think that that's a huge part of any professional, is really knowing when you need to put your foot on the gas and when you need to. And I think knowing your body, knowing your machine is so integral to that. Um, I try not to do too many stupid things. I'm pretty methodical with my warm-ups, you know. I'm very, I'm, yeah, I'm very strong on making sure that I've done my warm-ups, done my bars, make sure that I'm ready. And my routine of things. I kind of look after myself pretty well, as much as I can. And those are the things you can do. Of course, you know, you have some people who are more prone to injury and things like that. But I think that the way that I go about it is that I really try to look after myself and do the things that are going to make most sense for my body. Um, and yeah, and then take it as it comes. But I do think that knowing when to push, you know, I saw it in an interview from Precious a few weeks ago. She said no athlete would be expected to be in peak performance shape 12 months of the year, but somehow it's required of dancers, right? Often, and it's so true. So I think a large part of it is knowing when you need to put your foot on the gas, do your run throughs, and also knowing when to go, okay, I'm just going to work on this today, I'm going to work on this. And yeah, I think that helps.
Brilliant. I have another question here from Fiona.
Mm.
Gareth, can you talk about balancing guesting with ballet nights and other
Mm.
gardens around the
Mm.
UK and Europe, and what it is that interests you about doing these?
Mm. Um, Yeah, I think that it is a fine balance. Absolutely. What you will find in majority of principal schedules is that it can be very busy at some times, but then there are often drop-offs, and there will potentially be some times where artists might not be involved in a program or only in one piece in the program, whereas the corps de ballet kind of expected to be there all the time and do everything. We do have these gaps, and sometimes it's quite important for us to keep going in these gaps, because otherwise it's really difficult if you have a huge drop off or a break from the stage, then to get yourself going when you've got to, you know, do Swan Lake or something. So I think it is important sometimes to keep ourselves going. I think what's appealing for me I in doing these kind of extra guestings and is being surrounded by a different group of artists. I find that so unbelievably inspiring. Meeting new people from different walks of life or different parts of the world at different companies and constantly learning. Performing in different venues as well is really exciting, also to a newer audience. And um, often when we do these kind of galas or guestings, you could be a bit more decisive in the repertoire that you're dancing, right? When you work for a big company, you can't always say like, oh, well, you don't get to choose the repertoire. You don't get much say in the repertoire as it is. So it's nice for us to have a little bit more opportunity. Or now Sung and I have just had a new pas de deux created on us by a choreographer that we've wanted to work with. which will come next year. So it's exciting, or I feel very fortunate that I'm in a position where I can also start to slowly get things commissioned for us, work with different choreographers or artists. So I hope that that kind of explains, and then fitting it in, my company is always my main focus. And that's just really an extra add-on. If it works, it works. And if I'm busy, then I don't do any extras.
Fair enough. Yes, I think that answers the question. So I've got another question here from Natalie. I was wondering if Gareth ever shared the stage with his sister.
Oh, great question. Yeah, the very first time we were on stage together was in Manon, and I'm smiling because my sister was a beggar. And I walked around the stage, and then all of a sudden, I just see someone look up at me like this. A beggar in the first act of Manon, and it was my sister. And I probably did lose it at that point, to be honest with you. And the only time that we actually kind of really shared the stage properly is one show had to do the demi-soloists of Symphony in C, second movement together. I think I think that was probably the only time that we kind of actually partnered each other or worked together. But yeah, other than that, we're often on stage together in different capacities. When I went to guest in Germany last year to do Sleeping Beauty, and she was my caraboss. Or so more moments like that, let's say. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. If not, I think that's it for the questions. I'm just trying to think if I've got anything I wanted to ask you, but I think I've asked you all my questions. So I think what I might do is I might hand back to Susan, who
Yeah.
And also everybody says thank you for answering.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. We've watched you in Sanguen. We've watched you on your own. We've enjoyed your dancing. We've been moved by it and that. And now we know that you have a smile that lights up the room. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing and for being so open with us. It's wonderful. And we will appreciate your artistry all the more when we next see you on stage,
Yeah.
which will be soon, and I hope often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Deborah, thank you so much. As always, you ask all the things we want to know and things we don't think of. So yeah, you guys make a good team. Thank you. So that's it for this evening. Just few quick reminders, please. December 3rd, our next Zoom in conversation will be with Tamara Rojo, who will be joining us from San Francisco. She's one of our vice presidents, and it's been a while since we caught up with Tamara, so that should be fun. And also, please remember to book for the visits to Acosta Danza next Monday afternoon. London Vocational Ballet School and English National Ballet School have also asked us to come and watch classes, and those both happen later this month. You can find all the booking details for these events on our website, tlbc.org.uk. So all that's left for me to say once again is an enormous thank you to Deborah and Gareth. It's been just a delightful evening, one we've been looking forward to, and it has not disappointed. And thank you to our audience for being here this evening. Because of your interest in LBC and in the ballet and your donations and your support, we're able to offer a small level of support to the future of ballet. And we all know how important that is to each and every one of us. So thank you for being here. Thanks again to our guests, and take care. And we will see you in December for Tamara Rojo. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.